Fun fact, Legionnaire's disease hid so well that it literally used the body's own immune cells as a place to multiply.
I see. So our defense system basically said, come on in, and handed out free rooms.
Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of Forensic Fails, Season 1, Episode 7, Legionnaires Disease. I'm Brian.
And I'm Kristin. Don't forget, if you are enjoying this podcast, and of course you are, be sure to follow and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, leave us a 5-star review, and tell a friend. It'll not only help ensure that you don't miss an episode, but it will also help ensure that others will find our show too.
And we now have a Patreon with three different levels. For just $5 a month, that's our Dr. Henry Lee level, you'll get our weekly pre-pod pod. That's our before show where we shoot the shit, give some hot takes, and share some moronic miscreants, some of the most ridiculous crimes and criminals you can think of, plus at least one bonus episode a month on a true crime or true crime adjacent show or documentary.
And for just $5 more, that's $10 a month, you can join us at our Sir Alec Jeffreys level. You'll get everything we talked about at the $5 level, plus early and ad-free access to all our episodes.
And the penultimate patrons can join us at the $15 level. That's our beloved Peter Thomas level. You'll get everything we just talked about, plus you will get recognized by name, shouted out as a Peter Thomas level patron on our show and in our show notes.
To join our Patreon, go to www.patreon.com/forensicfailspod. And don't worry if you didn't write that down. We'll have all of that for you in the show notes.
All right, so we're headed into Season 1, Episode 7, Legionnaires Disease, and I guess we should just preface this by saying that this is a bit of a different episode versus the ones that we've seen thus far, and one of the things, and I don't think we've specifically discussed this so far, but I think it'll be evident as we go through. Again, this is not necessarily a crime episode like the others. It could have been a crime, but it wasn't. And this actually takes us to the origins of the show, though, because we didn't discuss the fact that the first 4 seasons of the show is actually known as Medical Detectives, and they rebranded it as Forensic Files. So this is more in the keeping with the theme of medical detectives and being kind of more epidemiological versus crime per se.
Right. So it wasn't like a difficult episode in that it was a struggle to see some of the images or anything like that. It was definitely not what I was expecting when I started watching the show. But it was interesting. And when I first read the synopsis, I was like, I was kind of dragging my feet a little bit.
Yeah.
But it was definitely something of interest once I got into it.
Yeah. So, all right. With that, Kristin, why don't you take us away into the world of Legionnaires Disease?
Okay. So this is Season 1, Episode 7, Legionnaires Disease. Our show begins in the city of brotherly love, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the birthplace of the United States, and clearly a state that was cashing in on that and celebrating 200 years of countryness in a big way, as they should, because lots of awesome things took place there 200 years ago, now 250 years ago. Also, this story is going to be 50 years old this summer.
Yeah, and actually, too, I mean, we are gearing up for our country's 250th birthday, and I think they're kind of planning on It's not going to be quite the same as Bicentennial, but I would expect that we are
Still
going
a
to see
big deal.
some celebratory action this summer, probably in Philadelphia as well. It's also actually funny that we are recording this weekend because I was literally just in Philadelphia this past week for work. So my company's Philly office is in Center City, and it's funny because I took a selfie of myself in the office with the city behind me, and I sent it to our family group chat. And my son texted me back, "Is that a college campus behind you?" And I'm like, "No, son, that's Independence Hall, home of the Liberty Bell." So I guess I need to take my family there for some history lessons and, of course, some cheesesteaks.
Ooh, go to Jim's of South Street.
Is that the place to go? Okay.
Yes, that was one of our favorite places to get cheesesteaks in Philly. My
Okay.
husband, his company had an office right outside of Philly. So we spend quite a bit of time there. It's a great city.
It is a really great city. It's very, I think it's smaller than New York City. It's more accessible, kind of more easy to explore. And tons of history and tons of great food.
Oh, and the Reading Terminal Market, love it.
I had to check that out for sure.
Yes, you do. Okay, so I need to admit here, before watching this episode, I honestly had no idea what Legionnaires' disease was. I honestly thought it was some kind of like weird seaborne germ that sailors contracted on ships that died out hundreds of years ago. And honestly, I wasn't even sure what a Legionnaire was. So I looked it up because, of course, I did. And I don't like being unprepared when watching a show. I'm one of those people who watches a show or a movie with the Wikipedia page open so I could refer to it as I'm watching, but I don't read ahead because I don't want to ruin anything. So anyway, for those like me who weren't sure what a Legionnaire is, I'll tell you. A Legionnaire is a member of the American Legion, the largest U.S. wartime veteran service organization chartered by Congress in 1919. They are honorably discharged or active duty service members who served since December 7th, 1941, which was, for those of you that don't know, when the United States officially entered World War II. They focus on camaraderie, volunteering, youth mentorship, and advocating for veterans' benefits. Legionnaires are distinguished by their commitment to the 4 pillars of the organization: Veterans Affairs and Rehabilitation, National Security, Americanism, and Children and Youth.
And I actually always wondered what the difference was between the American Legion and the VFW, or Veterans of Foreign Wars, right? Because you would see very often there's like an American Legion Hall, a VFW Hall. So it turns out the American Legion is open to anyone who served at least one day of active duty during an official wartime period, even if they never left the United States. The Veterans of Foreign Wars, on the other hand, require service in a foreign conflict, combat zone, or expedition, usually proven by a campaign medal or hazardous duty pay. So, while all VFW members could qualify for the American Legion, not all American Legion members qualify for the VFW. I was actually disappointed that it was so straightforward. I just always imagined them as like rival veterans organizations with like old vets in one group talking shit about old vets in the other group, like the old school like East Coast, West Coast rap wars.
Oh, God.
Unfortunately, it's not that. I was disappointed.
It's funny because both of my cousins are in the National Guard.
Okay.
And one of them was activated and sent to Iraq. The other one, though, stayed here and was a drill instructor somewhere in the country. So one of them would be eligible for the VFW and the other one would be eligible for the American Legion. Interesting. I wonder if they know that.
And I wonder if it would cause a rift.
I don't know. I'll find out tomorrow. I'll bring it up during dinner.
All right. Bring it up. I'm curious to know.
All right. Well, now that we've had that little history lesson, civic lesson, let's get back to our episode. The opening is full of incredible 1976 footage of people visiting the sites of Philly and attending parades. We get some awesome vintage cars driving past and impressive sights of military and police engaging in the parades too. And it must have been quite a time to be alive in our country. And I'm sure the dudes selling those bicentennial shirts were able to just cash in and retire to Cabo after that summer. But then Peter, after telling us what a slamming great time it was, decides to drop this huge buzzkill of a line. Quote, Philadelphia made history that summer, but not for the bicentennial. It was the mysterious deaths of 34 people that left a tragic legacy and launched the most extensive medical investigation in history. Look, I love him, but sometimes Peter just reminds me of Debbie Downer, and I say that with love.
Well,
Also,
feline AIDS is the number one killer of domestic cats.
It's
one of my favorite Debbie Downer lines.
Also, it's important to remember that this show aired in 1976, so pre-COVID. So while it is fascinating, sometimes to me, and I know this sounds horrible, it was a little kind of dull at times because we've lived through a pandemic and all that goes with it. But again, this is pre-COVID, so I completely understand the drama and the necessity and everything involved with it.
Yeah, and I mean, 34 deaths associated with these bicentennial gatherings, that's an enormous number.
Yeah.
Plus, I think what's a little different, too, is that by the time COVID came to us, we knew a little more. Like, it had a name. We knew what it was, kind of, even if we didn't know quite how to treat it or prevent it. But here it really was like a true medical mystery.
Right. And I think with COVID, too, we were expecting it. Like we knew it was kind of making the rounds.
Yes.
I don't think we expected what we got, but we knew there was something out there that was eventually making its way towards us. But this was different in that it just started happening and nobody knew. So apparently in the summer of 1976 in Philly, while fun and exciting, it was also stressful for those in charge of it all. There was a lot of behind-the-scenes soap operas taking place. There was a potential garbage strike in the works. The workers actually staged a slowdown, which means that the sanitation workers deliberately worked at a slower pace as a way of protesting working issues. And that means that at times, garbage wasn't collected in a timely manner and began to pile up, which if you've ever been to a city in the summer on garbage day and walk past a pile of it, you know just how unpleasant that can be. Not to mention, it's not the kind of thing you want hanging around on the sidewalks during the biggest birthday party this country has seen up to that point.
Right. So Peter tells us sanitation workers staged a work slowdown over a wage dispute, and the mountains of uncollected garbage created serious health concerns.
Mm-hmm.
If this is just the result of a slowdown, I cannot imagine what a strike would have looked like, because it looked like a landfill on the side of the road. And to your point, that couldn't have smelled good in humid July in Philadelphia. I mean, not really the best time for the city to dig in its heels on a contract. So I'm going to say good for you, sanitation workers.
Yeah, exactly. They want what's good for them, and I don't blame them. That's not exactly a delightful job.
No, not at all.
So they should be treated as well as they can be.
Absolutely.
Also, they showed footage of two sanitation workers during that little voiceover from Peter, and it kind of made me giggle because one of the men working he was just wearing a pair of pants and a white short sleeve button down and a Panama hat, smoking a cigarette. And he honestly looked like he was like heading off to the club after work and had his party clothes on already. I don't know why I found that so funny, but I did. Also, there were terrorist threats happening. Someone was anonymously tipping off the police that there might be some violence, no description on what kind, at the American Legion's convention because citizens were none too happy with the U.S. foreign policy decisions at the time.
Now, I suppose you cannot rationalize with a terrorist, but What good, pray tell, is targeting Legionnaires going to do? These guys are vets of World War One, World War Two, Korea, Vietnam. I'm not sure how exactly terrorizing them is going to help, but what do I know?
And my thought too was this convention took place 2 weeks after the 4th of July.
Yeah,
So, I mean, not a terrorist, but I would think they'd have more people there during the 4th of July celebrations
right.
than during a Legionnaires convention,
And more
But
public officials and stuff like that.
right,
Than,
right.
right,
Like
yeah.
you don't have the governor showing up at the Legionnaires convention. At least I
No,
don't think
these
you would, but
probably not, no.
I guess it's good that I don't think like a psychopath. So, the convention was taking place at the Bellevue Stratford Hotel. And according to its Wikipedia article, it was a pretty fancy schmancy place in Philadelphia. But at the time of our story, its reputation had begun to decline. And Peter is still holding on to the fact, though, that it was one of Philadelphia's finest hotels.
Yeah, he just didn't want to besmirch the Bellevue
Yes.
Stratford name. Having just been in Philadelphia, I was wondering where it was and if I had seen it, and heck, if I
Hmm.
had even been in it. So in 1988, the building was converted to a mixed use development.
Hmm.
It has been known since then as the Bellevue. The hotel portion is currently managed by Hyatt as the Bellevue Hotel.
Hmm.
I kind of want it to stay there the next time I go to Philly, but it's a 20-minute walk to my office versus 5 for my usual preferred hotel. And I actually also just went onto my company's travel app to see if I could book this the next time I go. And it's actually not even available for booking. So it's not a preferred hotel for us, or we don't have a special rate for them. Or my company is just maybe still worried about Legionnaires still
Fallout.
kind of hanging out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will not have an option to stay there on the company dime. So if I ever go, it will be purely for my own personal. It'll be on my dime.
Okay. Or, from the piles of money we'll make from our podcast.
Well,
You
that's
can
right. The
expense it.
hell, the LLC will pay for it.
That's
Yeah.
right. So, Peter also tells us that the hotel was having problems of its own, like a problem with the air conditioner. And look, I'm going to be straight up honest. I don't care what the purpose is for my visit. If I go to a hotel in the summer in a major city and the air conditioning isn't working, I'm not staying there. No, thank you. Also, we get a prize-winning reenactment of a hotel worker opening a door for an air conditioning serviceman who lets him know, I'm here to check the hotel's air conditioning system. And it lasts all of 10 seconds. Peter also informs the viewers that hotel security was putting in some overtime to keep the prostitutes away from the convention in the busy summer season. I don't know why they felt they had to throw that in, but here we are.
Yeah. So Peter tells us his quote was, hotel security was also working to make sure that prostitutes were kept away from the hotel during the busy summer season. So when I heard Peter say, quote, hotel security was also working, I thought the last part of the sentence was going to be to keep the terrorists away from the Legionnaires. I honestly didn't think they were going to talk about sex workers, but priorities.
Yeah, that wouldn't be the first thing that popped into my mind,
No.
but
Poor Legionnaires, just looking for a good time. Come on.
Hey. So Philadelphia, aside from the birthday bonanza, was also being visited that summer by 4,500 Pennsylvanian Legionnaires for their annual convention, which took place July 21st through July 24th. Bob McGarry, a Legionnaire, explains that it was a social event, and he calls it a jolly, jovial time. But business was usually done by noon, and then they could just hang out and enjoy themselves.
Jolly, jovial time.
Yes.
This man sounds so wholesome. It was just such an old-timey way to describe such a thing, wasn't it?
I know. I loved it. And also, he's wearing serial killer glasses, but on him, they work. And I like this guy. Charlie Davis is next, and he's explaining to us how he was a little anxious being in Philly because it was such a big city. These guys are they're so adorable. They're like grandpas from the 80s.
Let me tell you.
Them.
Oh, me too. I especially love Charlie. So
yes.
Legionnaire Charlie Davis looks like a Charlie Davis, right?
Absolutely.
And he is like 1,000,000% the guy I'm sitting next to at the American Legion bar at this convention throwing back Harvey Wallbangers. This guy has stories.
And I would want to hear them all.
I would not be
Yes.
able to like leave his side.
No.
I'd be glued to him.
Yes. So our convention ends and the men go home. And 8 days later, 2 men from the convention, both residents of Williamstown, Pennsylvania, die suddenly under mysterious circumstances. Like I said, both had attended the convention. Their cause of death was listed as pneumonia, and their lungs, according to the medical examiner, looked like Brillo pads. Yuck. Several other men got sick, including our boy Charlie, who explained that he was sick for days before his son encouraged him to go to the hospital. So we get this on-screen graphic explaining how the sickness hits the victims. And it's one of those body outlines with the words being superimposed over it. Symptoms: headache, muscle, chest pains, fever. And while the words are floating on the screen, the areas of the body that are affected by those words are being lit up. And within 3 weeks of the end of the convention, 11 more men had died.
And they also mention that the fevers can go up to 107.
Yeah.
So just for reference, fever as high as 107, that'll kill you or leave you damaged. So we're not going to walk into the forensics lab yet, but a little science here. So at very high temperatures, the body can no longer regulate itself effectively. Proteins begin to break down, the brain can swell, vital organs can fail. So most common fevers between 100 and 102 are not dangerous on their own. And they're actually there for a purpose. They can actually like help, low-grade fevers can actually help the body do its thing.
Mm-hmm.
Core temperature of 104 is considered a medical emergency. And then anything above 106 can be dangerous enough to cause brain damage, organ failure, or death if not treated quickly. So this is really, really serious stuff. When I heard 107, I was like, holy crap.
Yeah, I actually, last winter, I had the flu. And I was sick for about 2 weeks. And I ran a fever for a good four to 5 days. And there were days where my fever went as high as like 103.7.
Oof.
And, you know, I was like almost delirious, you know, and if that's how I felt with a fever at that temperature, I can't even imagine having a fever higher than that.
Yeah.
But
really
even
bad.
the doctor was like, if it gets over 104, you need to go to like the urgent care. But yeah. So the big shots up in Harrisburg, they were scared that they had an epidemic starting. So the CDC gets a call, and heading up the investigation is Dr. David Frazier. And I would like to note that his hairstyle hasn't changed from the clip of him in 76 to the clip of him in 1996. It is quite a look. And it makes me wonder if it's a toupee, because the 1996 hair, it looks a bit off. Like the color and the texture on top doesn't quite match up with the color and texture around the ears. I know I'm being very critical, and this is coming from a girl who can't be bothered with her own hair and most of the time wears it up in a very messy, scrunchy wrapped bun.
Okay, so see, my note on him was Dr. David Fraser, great hair then and now. As someone in denial over the thinning going on back here, I'm kind of envious.
That he does have a head of hair.
It is a head of hair, especially the 70s head was.
And it
that was
dark.
Intense.
He's got the like that weird swoopy bang thing that only hits the middle of his foot. It's like an extended widow's peak.
Yes,
but fluffy.
Yeah. I was here for it.
Yeah. Dr. Frazier lays out his plan of attack for us. He starts by comparing what people did, those who got sick and those who didn't, and see if there's any similarities or differences, which makes sense. Of course, this isn't going to be easy, as the men were from all over the state. And if you've ever driven through Pennsylvania, you know it's not a tiny place. I had a boyfriend who lived out by Penn State years ago, and it was a 4-hour drive from New Jersey to his house. And that was just a straight shot on Route 80. but there were a lot of cool roadside stops for coffee, so that was fun. So Doc and his team head to Philly, and by this time there are 11 deaths and 39 men who are very, very sick. And I am so distracted by his hair that I have to keep rewatching these scenes to take my notes. Also, for some reason, short sleeve dress shirts for men have always bothered me. I don't know why. I just do not like them.
They're terrible. They're
don't.
absolutely terrible.
I said it. I don't like how they look. Yes.
No, they look ridiculous.
Yes. All of them. All of these men were suffering from some form of pneumonia, but they couldn't pinpoint what was causing it. And the illness became a news story around the world. I love when I get to see old news clips, like old news anchors doing their job. I love it. Anyway, it's the press that have dubbed it Legionnaires disease. And we see some reporters talking about it, standing right in front of the hotel with its name visible. And all I could think is, this is going to be so bad for business. We also learned that one of the bus drivers who rode out to Philly for the convention with a bus full of, I believe it was band members for one of the parades, he also got sick and died. And because everyone was so scared of being sick, almost nobody attended his funeral, which made me so sad. And it brought me right back to the very first months of COVID when funerals couldn't even happen properly because of what was going on.
Yeah. I mean, my grandmother died during COVID, and it was just terrible. And in this case here too, there was such an understandable fear of the unknown, with people being afraid to go to a funeral. It does remind me a lot of COVID. We're so past the peak of that I think it's just so easy to forget how terrifying that is when you have this thing that's killing people, be it this case or COVID, and you just don't know exactly for sure how it spreads, who's at greatest risk, etc.
Yeah, those early days were frightening as hell. Like I would scrub my hands just after going to the mailbox.
Yeah.
And because you didn't know.
Yeah, and people do. I mean, people have unfortunately bad memories because from the very early days when this was going around, again, as viruses transmit over time, they tend to become less virulent as things spread easier. But in the very beginning, you were having people who were treating these COVID patients dying, like the very early cases, so it was very scary. So I understand the fear that these people must have felt.
Absolutely. Dr. Lewis Polk, who is a former health commissioner for Pennsylvania, is here, and he explains that the unknown scares people, basically saying that if people were dying because of a flood or an earthquake, they can reconcile that in their heads. But since this disease was just popping up and no one can figure out the why or how this was happening, that's what freaked people out, which, I mean, duh, I could have told you that. Dr. Frazier, he's back, and his head is just ginormous.
Not just the hair.
No, his whole head. I'm sorry. It's just, this is what I'm focused on. They started traveling and discussing the events of the convention with the men who are in the hospital, cross-checking what they did with what they ate, things like that. They've sent out questionnaires to everybody who attended the convention. And I have to say, I am so impressed with how organized all of this is, but I guess that's what they do. And some of the men are even asked questions like how many times they rode an elevator on a specific date. I mean, ask me what I had for breakfast yesterday, and I'm most likely going to get it wrong.
And for me, seeing these surveys being filled out and the questions being asked really makes you realize the complexity of this. And there were 4,500 guys at this convention, and we're getting all of these surveys collected, right? There's no computers or AI to easily collect and analyze these data. So this was likely very much a very, very manual process in collecting it and then just interpreting and synthesizing it all.
I mean, there were pieces of paper with typewritten questions that men were answering with a pencil.
Yeah.
So it wasn't even like a Scantron.
Incredible. No, exactly.
So in addition to the questionnaires, they also collected dust, air, water, animal droppings, tissue samples from the autopsied victims to use in their data collections. They thought swine flu was a possibility, as well as something called parrot fever. Yes, I said it correctly. Parrot fever. Who knew that even existed? Not this girl.
Yeah, and apparently, so it's also known, the real name is psittacosis for parrot fever.
Mm-hmm.
It is a rare bacterial infection that people can catch from birds by inhaling dust from their droppings or feathers. And it's not just parrots, like pigeons and stuff like that are known to be carriers. It usually causes flu-like symptoms and can lead to pneumonia, but it is treatable with antibiotics. But again, at this time, they had to just think about the stuff that they knew about.
Anything it could be. Yeah.
Right.
So Dr. Polk is now saying that it's possible that convention goers may have, quote, indulged in one of several ways, drinking or sex or something, which makes me wonder what the something might be. And of course, now they're wondering if this is all caused by an STI, which used to be called an STD. And back in 1996, it was called venereal disease. And just hearing Peter say venereal disease made me giggle, because I wonder sometimes when he got the script if he would look at the writers and be like, guys, come on. I'd rather not say that. Anyway, when he says venereal disease, all I could think of was the episode of Friends where Joey was a model for a venereal disease campaign. And it's a picture of him. And it says what Mario isn't telling you. And then VD, you never know who might have it. And he's like in the subway and he's like looking at this girl. And then she sees the poster behind him and kind of runs off. That's where my mind went. Anyway, the question is raised as to maybe this might be something called super gonorrhea. I need to say it again. Super gonorrhea, because sometimes regular gonorrhea just isn't enough.
Okay. We need to talk about VD and super gonorrhea.
Hey.
So I have a lot to say here.
I bet.
First of all, I'm sure these guys loved it when they started suggesting maybe it was VD. These poor guys are on their deathbeds, and now the wives thinking, how dare you? Like super gonorrhea, no less. Because you know that some of these wives probably suspected or even knew that their husbands or boyfriends might have been, fraternizing with the locals while deployed, right? It happens. Maybe, right? They had even heard about all the sex workers that were in Philly at the time. And
not at the Bedford, because security was working to keep them away.
Supposedly.
Yeah.
But maybe they were wondering if it was a bit more than brotherly love being doled out in Philadelphia. You know what I'm saying? But the whole okay, you're usually the one with the good movie references, and I'm usually know nothing. But the few movies I know well. And so one of my favorite movies is Tommy Boy. Like, I love Tommy Boy. So as I'm watching it, I was just picturing this. There's this scene of this angry older lady in the boardroom of Tommy Boy. Do you remember this?
So I've only watched Tommy Boy like once or twice. And all I really remember is fat guy in little coat, the maniac scene, and brothers hug.
Brothers don't shake hands. Brothers gotta hug. I could quote Tommy Boy for days, okay?
It's definitely a guy movie.
Oh, I think so too. And my cousin Jackie.
Okay, yes.
Because she loves Chris Farley. So R.I.P. So anyway, so it though reminded me, so there's this scene in Tommy Boy. So this is going to be for all my Tommy Boy bros out there. There's this scene in Tommy Boy towards the end of the movie. They're figuring out how to save the company, okay? And it's all the board members. And two of the board members are this older husband, wife. And this wife just has a really angry look on her face the entire time, okay? So, so one of the people at the meeting, one of the executives says, if this factory goes under, the whole town goes under, okay? And then this older lady says, and that's when the whores come in. Men laying their trick money down, $20 to pay the rent. Maybe instead I'll spend it on the whore. Whores running around doing their little behind shake for the menfolk. And then her husband says, for Christ's sake, Once during the war, I visited a prostitute, and my life has been a living hell ever since. So I'm literally picturing every Legionnaire wife being this woman. All right, and now you have to just watch Tommy Boy, even if you just go to the end just for that scene. Just for that scene. Because I could not get that out of my head the entire time I'm watching this. And they're talking about the VD and these vets. I'm thinking of this scene from Tommy Boy and $20 to pay the rent. Maybe instead I'll spend it on the whore.
I think of Goodfellas when Karen goes to confront whore. You're a whore, Rossi. Yeah, that's where my head goes. So anyway.
Sorry for that little diversion.
It happens, and they're fun. So the CDC is also wondering if maybe the sanitation strike was the cause due to all the rats and the overall icky conditions of the garbage piled up around the city. They also circled back to the potential terrorist threat mentioned at the beginning of the episode and think maybe the Legionnaires were poisoned. Of course, one of the big questions they were trying to figure out, why did some of the men get sick and others did not? So our friend Bob from the beginning, he was okay, but his roommate during the convention got sick. He was told to go to a hospital, Bob was, so they could check him out. And he explains how he was tested like he's never been tested before, including slava, which is saliva, but I can't hate on how he says it because I like him too much.
Okay, I had that exact same note. I thought it was just me and that I misheard it, but I totally heard slava.
Slava. I'm wondering if it's maybe like a regional thing.
It must be.
You know?
Yeah.
Slava.
So
Dr. Fraser tells us that rooming with someone who was sick didn't increase your chances of being sick. And that was very important information because it suggested that the disease wasn't happening in the bedrooms and it wasn't spread through person-to-person contact. The CDC was able to rule out a number of diseases, including typhoid and the plague. I'm not sure which plague, just the plague. So I'm guessing bubonic, because I can't think of any other plagues aside from locusts, read your Bible, that were a part of history. Also, super gonorrhea was ruled out. And I'm guessing any convention goer who partied hard that weekend was breathing a sigh of relief with that one. I mean, it is one thing to go home and let your wife know you have Legionnaires disease. It's another thing to go home and say you have gonorrhea. And at that point, if they did have gonorrhea, they were probably wishing they did have Legionnaires because, you know, I wouldn't want to go home and have to admit that I have crotch cooties to the wife that I picked up with on a weekend jaunt with the boys.
$20 to pay the rent.
Now, here is a mystery. Not everyone who got sick attended the convention or stayed at the Bedford Stratford Hotel. And I'm sure the manager of the hotel breathed a huge sigh of relief when he heard that. Also, none of the employees who were working there got sick. Dr. Fraser lets us know that people who spent time on the sidewalk outside the hotel were more likely to get sick, which is actually a good way to get rid of loiterers. Don't loiter here. It causes Legionnaires disease. I can almost see that as an ad campaign or posters posted on the side of the building.
Yeah, and at some point we are shown some B-roll footage from the hotel area and street in front of the hotel. And for the entire episode, we see B-roll footage from the 1970s. But now, for some inexplicable reason, we are showing modern-day footage. Like, did they forget what time period we were in? I was watching, I'm like, what is happening?
The editors of this show sometime.
Yeah.
You know? So, if you haven't been paying attention yet, this is what you need to hear. These are the common factors that the infected men shared. Most of them were over 50. 17 of the victims were smokers, and some of them had pre-existing illnesses, which, yes, are common factors. But I'm sure also if you polled 100 people today, the same factors would pop up. The doc and his team are sure that the hotel is the connection, but they couldn't narrow down what exactly it was. But they were narrowing down that it might be an airborne disease since people outside of the hotel were getting sick. One man who was interviewed in the 70s tells us that, quote, the two fellas he roomed with got sick and he didn't, which made me wonder how many beds were in these hotel rooms. I mean, I guess if you want to save a buck, you can share a bed with some rando at a convention. But all I know is that at this stage of life, if I am staying in a hotel for a convention, I am getting my own room. I think I've earned that right. Also, I don't want to share a bathroom with anyone if I don't have to. Say what you want about me, but I like my privacy and my quiet time.
I make a bet they all enforce like okay, if we're gonna share the same bed, we're doing the head to foot rule.
Head to foot, yeah. So now we are introduced to Dr. Sunderman from the University of Connecticut. He gets involved because he received an anonymous letter saying that the Legionnaires were intentionally poisoned. Look, I hate when people send anonymous letters. I mean, if you're trying to be a big shit and scare people, have the balls to sign your name.
I would have liked a little context on who the heck Dr. Sunderman was and why he was picked to send this letter to.
Right.
So I did a little research myself. So apparently, Dr. Sunderman was a pioneering American physician, clinical chemist, toxicologist. His career spanned more than 80 years, including research on lab medicine. He worked on the Manhattan Project. He founded a major clinical science journal. He is known to have made lasting contributions to lab quality control and medical testing. He taught at multiple institutions, including UConn, and he remains professionally active well into extreme old age, even being named America's oldest worker at the age of 100. He continued working almost until his death at age 104. Reportedly keeping full work days into his final weeks, making him one of the longest working physicians on record. Now, this is different than me, who is doing calculations as to like when I can comfortably retire. And I actually, once I became 50, I joined AARP.
Me too.
I was very excited to do so. And I actually now have the app on my phone, and I have notifications. AARP is almost one of the few apps that I have notifications turned on, because I actually enjoy getting AARP notifications, because it's just a friendly reminder that retirement is on the horizon at some point in the near future. Not 5 years or anything close to that, but it'll happen. I'm not working until I'm 104.
Well, no. I've had a countdown on my phone because as teachers, if you have 25 years in your district, you retire with health benefits.
Yep.
And with our pension, you can retire at 55. So I have had a countdown to April 12th, 2030 for quite a long time. So I've got about 4 years to go.
God.
I know.
This is me not being envious.
Well, I'll take little day trips and I'll send you pictures of the gushers that I buy at convenience stores. so you don't feel bad. So Dr. Sunderman, he is an expert on nickel carbonyl, which is a highly toxic, volatile, colorless to yellow liquid used in nickel refining, metal plating, and as a chemical catalyst. It is extremely hazardous. It causes severe lung damage, cancer, and potential death, often with delayed symptoms. And knowing all this, I'm amazed he lived to be 104.
Yeah, really.
It has a very musty odor, which I hate musty odors, probably about as much as Brian hates fragrance at the gym.
Like, I wonder, does it smell like a Goodwill store? Like, what?
I don't know. Like, I don't. Ugh. Yeah. You know what though? I'm just gonna have to wonder on that one because I don't want to get too close to find out.
No.
It is something that could be spread through the air and could cause pneumonia, much like the strands of pneumonia in the victims. And after some liver tests on the men who died, it showed that nickel was indeed present. So now people are thinking, aha, we cracked the case.
Yeah, and of course we have some dummy politician prematurely saying, yep, it's been solved.
Oh yeah, they know everything.
Yep.
Not so fast, dear listeners. It turns out the nickel being found in the deceased patient was actually from the nickel on the scalpels being used during the autopsy. Bummer. So then they bring in Dr. Leonard Bachman, who was the state health secretary during that time. He has a press conference letting the world know they may never figure out what's causing the epidemic. Thank you, fearmonger. And I'm actually wondering myself if they're ever going to figure this out, because there's, at this point, about 7 minutes left in the show. But he promises that they're not going to give up. Even if it takes 2 years, they're going to get to the bottom of it. Thanks for that, Ace. So now we are 5 months into the outbreak, and it's Christmas, and the CDC people are celebrating the holiday season, described by Peter as a much-needed break since they had been working around the clock. And the reenactment that they have for us makes it seem like they are attending the dullest party ever. And I just think every holiday party needs a Cousin Eddie drinking eggnog out of a Marty Moose glass. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, get yourself a copy of Christmas Vacation.
Oh, that is one movie I do know very, very well.
Everybody does. And if you don't, there's something wrong with you.
Totally. So this Christmas party is our first long form reenactment. I really had my notes first reenactment because that other thing with the hotel, I'm here to fix your air conditioning. Okay.
Yeah, that was
right
like a blink of an eye.
Real throwaway. Okay. But it's supposed to be 1976.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Everyone is dressed like it's 1996. No attempt was made to make this period appropriate. It's like they all answered the ad on Backstage. They got the call that they were casted. They said, okay, well, what should I wear? And they're like, just bring your street clothes. It's fine. Come as you are. Now, Kristin, I know if you were cast, you would have 100% come in a Mrs. Roper caftan, and I would expect nothing less.
I find it scary that you know me so well. Although I love the fact that our 35 years of friendship has allowed you to know me this well. Yes, I would have totally worn a caftan. I might have one or two myself.
1976. Come on.
Yeah, that's my summer look. I totally would have been wearing it, and I would have accessorized it like a champ. Dr. Joseph McDade and his wife, they're partying it up, not wanting to discuss work. But come on, we all know how work functions go. You aren't going to talk about the job, and then all of a sudden, that's all you're talking about. And I bet Joe is wishing he had listened to his wife and taken that trip to Boise to visit her parents right about now instead of going to this party, because basically his coworkers start to shame him for not having figured it out. And I think the CDC needs a lot more team building efforts, because how is this all his fault? But they're blaming him that there's no answers.
Yeah, what a bunch of assholes he works with.
Seriously.
Like, literally bullied out of the party. Like, didn't they all work for the CDC? Why don't you go solve the case? Like, poor McDade has to leave while all his coworkers stay behind, indulging in fondue and blacking out after a few too many cherry herrings. Like, and also, it was the 1970s, so I'm actually wondering if it was a key party.
I don't know. Now it was super gonorrhea going around.
Maybe not.
Anyway, our boy, he is actually guilted into canceling his vacation, and he goes back to work. And we know this because this black and white reenactment shows him in a biohazard suit alone in a lab looking at a slide under a microscope. It's a slide of a liver tissue sample from a guinea pig. And please don't come at us about animal cruelty. We're just stating the facts here.
Yes.
And he notices something new. Bacteria he hadn't seen before. And it's bacteria he had never seen, that kind of bacteria, kind of new. He missed it the first 100 times he examined it kind of moment. It was a eureka moment, and I love eureka moments.
Did you notice we had the new special effect from last week where we flipped from color to black and white with no reason? And it was like in the middle of someone talking. I saw, like, just for shits and gigs.
I want to know that we're paying attention.
I suppose.
Yeah. So anyway, he tests it and retests it to make sure it's valid and not a mistake, which is smart because you don't want to be the guy who figures it all out only to discover that you screwed up by not checking the facts. Peter explains the process in the most dramatic style, which we love him for. And Doc Frazier, in his coiffed self, is explaining that Dr. McCade found the breakthrough they were looking for. And we now have Legionella pneumophila, which is now a thing of record. And they named it in honor of the Legionnaires in Philadelphia.
Yeah, so Legionella pneumophila in honor of the Legionnaires in Philadelphia. Like, is that an honor, really? But then I was wondering, like, if the fellas at the VFW are sort of pissed off that they don't have a bacterium named after them. Like, again, I'm fully like I'm down for this vision. Yeah. I'm invested in this being like old school East Coast West Coast old East Coast West Coast rap wars. Like, I really want this to be like, we've got the VFW hall on one side of town, the American Legion hall on the other side of town, and they fucking hate each other.
I'm envisioning West Side Story, and we have the Jets and the Sharks, and they're going to rumble in the street, but it's going to be very well choreographed. Legionella, you know.
But I'm also I'm just into small town sort of like unnecessary drama, like when I go to Kohl's, right, and I see, I could tell like the two, a bunch of employees are feuding with each other. Like, that's the kind of feuds I'm interested in.
Those, yeah.
So
guess what can kill this bacteria? Good old erythromycin. That's right, kids. Science. It works. So everyone is happy that we have a way of fixing the problem. But of course, we still don't know where or how this all came to be. The hotel samples show nothing since the bacteria was dead in any of the samples they had collected. But they did figure out that the bacteria multiplied in warm, watery condition, which upon hearing that gave me some serious ick feelings. Doc Frazier is now thinking that the water towers on top of the hotel, remember that reenactment from the beginning that we just spoke about? It all goes back to that. And if you want to know how air conditioning systems work, fear not, because Forensic Files is going to show us in a colored digital explanation. So the bacteria was sitting in the water tanks, it grew, it multiplied, and was spread through the air via the giant fans of the unit, and boom, there you have it, mass contamination.
Hey, Kristin.
Hey, Brian.
Did you hear that sound?
Oh, I sure did.
Were you getting worried?
I was.
This is the latest we've ever stepped into the forensics lab, I believe.
I know. I was actually scared that we weren't going to take the visit today.
No, well, we are visiting. So listen, I think Forensic Files did a really nice job of explaining how Legionnaires spread through the AC system.
Mm-hmm.
What I wanted to do today was focus on this question. Why was this thing so hard to find in the first place?
Okay.
So we're going to do a little microbiology lesson today.
I never took that.
Oh, you didn't? Oh, I did.
Nope.
Of course. Yeah. I did the whole,
science run.
Yeah. I did the microbio, the genetics, anatomy, physiology. I did like the trifecta at our little Catholic high school. So Legionella pneumophila is what you would call like a stealth pathogen. Okay. Mm-hmm. It's built to hide, survive, and evade detection at almost every level. So let's start with where it lives. So as we know, Legionella isn't hiding out in obvious places like blood or surfaces we routinely test. It lives in water systems, as you just said, and more specifically within the water systems, it lives inside something called a biofilm. And yes, a biofilm is as gross as it sounds. A biofilm is basically a slimy, microscopic community of organisms stuck to a surface, like inside of a pipe or a cooling tower. And inside that layer, bacteria are protected. Pond scum is biofilm. If you wake up in the morning and kind of run your tongue over your teeth and they feel a little gross, biofilm.
Ew.
You're welcome.
Ugh.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
Now it gets more layered, literally. So Legionella doesn't just live in biofilms. They actually infect amoebas. So do you remember these from freshman bio?
I do.
Okay.
Because we had an awesome teacher.
Yes. So they're these tiny single-celled organisms that naturally live in water. And this is one of the most important pieces of the puzzle. So Legionella invades these amoebas and replicates inside them, basically using them as a protective host. So now, instead of being exposed to the environment, the bacteria are hiding inside another organism. So it's almost like a Russian doll at this point. So you've got the Legionella inside the amoebas, inside the biofilm, okay, which does a couple things. First, it shields them from disinfectants, right? So even if you treat the water, the bacteria can survive inside the amoeba. Second, it makes them harder to detect because now you're not just looking for free-floating bacteria, you're looking for bacteria inside something else. But here's where it really connects to human infection, and this is super, super interesting to me. The same ability, that ability to invade and survive inside amoebas, is what allows Legionella to infect and survive inside of us humans. Because when Legionella enters the lungs, it targets immune cells called macrophages. Do you remember macrophages? Oh my God. Okay. I love macrophages. Okay. I'm getting very excited. So macrophages are one of the most important parts of your immune system. And it's like a very physical function that they perform. Honestly, the easiest way to think of them is like the body's version of Pac-Man, okay? They're constantly moving through your body, looking for anything that doesn't belong.
Yes, I do remember them now.
Right? Okay, yeah,
yes,
right?
Okay.
Yeah, bacteria, viruses, debris, and when they find it, they literally engulf it. They wrap around the invader, they pull it inside, and then they destroy it using enzymes and other chemicals. That process is called phagocytosis, which is just a fancy word for saying cell eating, okay? So, under normal circumstances, this is incredibly effective. Something gets into your lungs, macrophages, your body's little Pac-Man shows up, chomp, 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 problem solved. But Legionella doesn't play by those rules. Instead of being destroyed, it actually survives the process. So it allows itself to be eaten, it shows the macrophage a little leg, macrophage engulfs it, okay? And it essentially hijacks the macrophage, okay? It gets in there, it creates a protective bubble inside the macrophage called a vacuole where it can live safely and avoid all the destructive mechanisms that would normally kill it. And then it starts replicating, okay? So now, instead of one bacterium being eliminated, you've got a macrophage acting like an incubator, producing more bacteria, okay? It's the system that's meant to help us completely kind of betrays us in a way. So eventually, the cell, the macrophage, fills up, okay? Because you've got these Legionella multiplying and multiplying and multiplying. So you have Pac-Man getting like super fat, right? At some point, the cell wall can't hold it any longer, okay? Explodes and releases a whole new wave of Legionella, which can go on to affect more cells, okay? So now you've created this whole army of Legionella. So the very system designed to protect you becomes the system that spreads the infection. And here's the wild part is that ability didn't evolve for humans. It evolved because Legionella were already infecting amoebas in the environment. Macrophages and amoebas are surprisingly similar at a cellular level. They both engulf things. So when Legionella enters a human macrophage, it's basically using the same survival strategy that it had already developed in nature with amoebas. So now, let's go back to why scientists struggled to identify it in the first place. Even if you had a sample from a patient, Legionella is notoriously difficult to grow in a lab. It doesn't grow well on standard culture media. So if you're running routine tests, you can get a completely negative result even when bacteria is there. That's a huge blind spot because in microbiology, if it doesn't grow, it doesn't get identified. So now think about this all together. It's hiding inside amoebas. Those amoebas are hiding inside biofilms, okay? In the human body, it's hiding inside these macrophages. It doesn't grow well under normal lab conditions. So this is not an easy organism to find. So that's what makes Legionella such a fascinating pathogen from a science perspective. It's not aggressive in the traditional sense. It doesn't spread person to person. It doesn't cause rapid, explosive infection change. infection chains, excuse me, is that it quietly builds itself into environments. It hides in infrastructures like water towers and cooling towers. It exploits biology, and then it waits for the right conditions to pounce, which means when it finally shows up, it doesn't look like a typical outbreak. It looks honestly like confusion. And that's exactly why it took so long. So that's our little deep dive late in the episode, but I hope it was worth the wait. Like, yes. I just found this it's weird to get that excited about bacteria, but I just found the way that this particular bacteria, how it acts, is super, super interesting. And I also think that, like, you know, of all the things in biology, like amoebas are relatively easy to understand. And I think macrophages, like once you're reminded what they are actually kind of easy to understand as well.
Yeah, that was great. Stuff like this would have been helpful in the show. But
right?
That's why we're here.
That's why we're there. Yeah, we pick up where Peter Thomas leaves off.
That's right. I mean, if they had all this in the show, people might not listen to us. So,
well, okay. Well, I'm glad they didn't then.
Thank you for that very informative educational trip into the lab.
You're welcome.
Brian.
Yes?
Are you wondering why the employees didn't get sick?
Yes.
Well, Peter explains that they probably developed an immunity to it. Kind of like the way teachers develop an immunity to a lot of germs after a while, unless you're me, in which case you manage to pick up every type of germ that floats through your classroom. And it's a good thing I didn't work at that hotel, because with my track record, if I did, I wouldn't be here today recording this episode. Also, this wasn't just local to Philadelphia. Scientists actually believe Legionella had been at work for thousands of years. And isn't that a scary thought to end our show? But we actually end our show with our boys, Bob and Charlie. They're there reminiscing. Charlie did get sick, but he recovered and Bob stayed healthy. They also never attended another convention again. So pretty smart thinking, gentlemen. Also, I did learn, because I wanted to look them up. I couldn't find anything on Charlie, but I did find out about Bob. Bob passed away in November of 2009. He was 80 years old, and he fought in the Korean War. He was released in 1949, returned to civilization, got activated again in Korea, served his time. His obituary is long and lovely, and he just seems like an all-around great man. So I was sad to read that, but he lived a good life.
And we thank them both for their service.
Thank you for your service, gentlemen. Yes.
All right. So this is the part of the show where we rate the episode on a scale of 1 to 10 DNA strands based on our assessment of both the investigation and the episode itself. I'll start us off this week.
Okay.
This is a tough one for me, because I do think Legionnaires' disease is really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I thought the epidemiology, I think how it's spread, I mean, I think all of that was very, very interesting. I'm honestly giving this episode a 5. And the reason I'm giving it a 5 is because it is just, and it may not be completely fair, but, you know, when I think of Forensic Files, and I realize the show kind of started out as medical detectives, but when I think Forensic Files, I'm honestly thinking a little bit more about crime and crimes being solved. We really didn't get that here. Again, it's just kind of choice of topic. It is an interesting epidemiological case. I really feel like they explained how it spread well at the end, but how it was actually discovered, right? Like, it just, that part to me like went a little bit quick. You know what I mean? So they spent all this time like building up to it and talking about all the things that it actually wasn't. I feel like they kind of rushed what it actually was, right? And so I'm really kind of rating it down for that, and just rating it down because it just wasn't, it just didn't feel like a very forensic-y episode of Forensic Files. So Yeah. So that's my rating for this week. I know I kind of rated it harshly.
I'm actually rating it lower.
Oh,
Because,
okay.
yeah, I'm giving it a 4.
All right.
And it's not because what they did wasn't important. And it was interesting. But like you said, it was like kind of like a lot of buildup to nothing. And then boom, all of a sudden. They spend more time talking about the prostitutes in VD than they did like the most important part of the show. And honestly, for as interesting as it was and important as what they were doing, it honestly just didn't hold my interest like some of the other shows. Like almost like they could have left this one out of the lineup, and maybe made it like a special or something like that. And again, I understand like the original title of the show, this does kind of fit in with that. But overall, out of everything we've watched so far, this one was kind of the lowest.
Yeah. Yeah. All
Although
right. So
I did get a giggle over hearing Peter say venereal disease.
And it was a Bob Slava.
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 Yeah.
Slava. All right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
It happens. Not
It
everything's going to
happens.
be an
It
8 or 10.
happens. No, nope.
So. And this was like a rage-free episode too.
It was a rage-free. Yeah, there was really no one that either of us could rage over, honestly. Yeah.
I think even my 4-letter words were kept to a minimum. Shocking.
Yeah.
I'm very disappointed in myself.
I know. Yeah, there was not much to say about it. And that's why, honestly, too, like the Forensics Lab, we kind of like went into it late because even as I was preparing for today's episode, I'm like, what am I going to talk about?
Yeah,
like,
you had to find your entrance.
Yeah. So anyway, with that, we thank you for joining us nonetheless. And that's it for this episode of Forensic Fails.
Where the science was complicated, the narration was intense.
And the reenactments somehow managed to raise even more questions.
Until next time.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.